Caribbean. We have with us today none other than one of the major players in that drama in Guyana, the opposition leader of the People's National Congress, Mr. Desmond Hoyte. Mr. Hoyte, once again, welcome to CaribNation.
My pleasure.
This is my third interview with you in 2 years, so you're a regular. I'm going to ask you some tough questions today because the situation in Guyana demands tough questions and some serious answers.
Yes.
Let me ask you straight up. Are you embarrassed that 3 times over the last 9 months, CARICOM officials have had to go into Guyana to help to bring some solution to problems you have there?
No, I wouldn't say that I'm embarrassed. I would have thought that the CARICOM leaders saw an opportunity to demonstrate the interconnection between Guyana and the rest of CARICOM. That, you know, we're talking about being a region. We're talking about people having common interests, moving towards a single market, a single economy, and in a sense, a single identity, you know. And I do not find it offensive in any way that they should try to help. And I would be the last person to say to CARICOM leaders, don't come into Guyana and try to assist in a very difficult situation.
But don't you think it's a reflection that the Guyanese people, the Guyanese political leaders, cannot solve their own problems?
Well, it's not that we can't solve it, but I think that the CARICOM leaders felt that they could play a role. You know, you can solve problems in many ways. I mean, the problems that we had and still have, were heading towards a serious resolution through conflict. You know, and the question is whether that was the best way. The CARICOM leaders proposed another way of dealing with the problems and the conflicts.
Let me hold on to that word you use, conflict,
Yes.
because you're quite right in describing the situation as one of conflict. That conflict manifests itself not just politically, but racially.
Yes.
And I think that's very dangerous.
Yes.
We have a situation in Guyana where the country is racially polarized. Do you think that we can continue to deal with politics the same way as we've been doing all the time and solve the problem in that way?
No, absolutely not. First of all, I think that we have to acknowledge that we have a multiplicity of problems, of which race is a prominent one. Many people still deny that you have a racial problem, and therein lies a problem. Another problem, if we acknowledge that there's a racial problem, then we have to face this problem frontally and in a very intelligent way try to see how we could so structure our constitution and our internal social and other arrangements so as to minimize, if not completely eliminate, this racial problem. And that is what we're grappling with right now.
I am not one of those persons who like to harp on 28 years of PNC rule, but I've got to ask you this question pointedly. I was in Guyana and I saw the demonstrations immediately after the elections, and it was clear to me that the majority of your supporters, who were African Guyanese, were demonstrating against more than just election rigging. They were demonstrating against their condition, their economic and social condition. And I want to ask you, how do you feel that your government, which was supported by the majority of black people for 28 years, now you're out of office, and that they are in the position they're in economically and socially?
Well, let's get back and look at this thing in perspective. You know, they were demonstrating not only against what they perceived to be massive manipulation of the election results, but against bad governance, victimization, discrimination, you know, joblessness, which is very high, particularly among young people. So it's a very complex situation there. Now, bear in mind that in 1985, when I took office, the economy was in a very bad way, and the whole objective had to be to restore the economy from one of stagnation to one of growth and the development of opportunities for employment, for investment and things like that. And we started to do that. In the 5 years, we did a remarkable turnaround, which put the Guyana economy on a firm basis for what I would call a rapid takeoff. We got the growth rate going again at, what, 6–7%. We got investments coming in from United States, from Canada, from United Kingdom, continental Europe, and to me, most satisfying of all, from the Caribbean. You know, and prior to that, no Caribbean businessman was going to touch us with a 10-foot pole. And so we had the policies, and we had the programs, and we had created a climate which would have created the kind of economic situation which would have given the Guyanese people an opportunity to really move forward and develop themselves. Unfortunately, those policies were not carried out by the PPP when they came in. And it's a fact that between 92, when they got into office, and now, there has not been another major significant investment in the country. And that is why today we are in economic crisis. And we've gone right back where the first half of this year we had negative growth. In other words, we've gone full circle.
Let me press you on this question.
Yes.
You've said that the People's National Congress, your party, is not a black people party. It's an all-inclusive party.
That's what we...
However, the majority of your support, the bulk of your support...
Absolutely, the same as the majority of the PPP supporters are Indians.
Are Indians.
Yes.
But it seems to me that African people in Guyana have some special problems.
Yes.
That may not be necessarily the same with Indian Guyanese. Yeah. What I want to find out from you is whether your party intends at any point, whether in opposition or if you get back in government, to tackle the problems, these particular problems of African Guyanese in that country.
Well, let me put it this way, that no government, if it wants to succeed, can present itself as being a government of part of a country. And I think that's the mistake that the PPP has been making.
Okay.
I think the first principle of government is that when a political party is elected to office, it becomes the government of all the people. And it has to be seen to be non-partisan, to be even-handed, to be just.
Right.
And that is what a People's National Congress government will try to do. Now, that does not mean that in terms of development, one does not look at or cannot look at particular areas, whether they be geographical, you know, there are some parts of the country that are depressed, whether it be ethnic, you know, because bear in mind that you have large numbers of poor Indians. You know, people talk sometimes if every Indian is rich, every Indian has a big bite. It's not true. They suffer from the same bad housing, bad roads, and drainage and so on as black people do. Black people being the urban people, you know, it is more prominent, it's more easily recognized, and so on. So what I'm saying is that we have to look at all sections of our society, and we have to devise policies that will discriminate positively in favor of depressed geographical sections, depressed ethnic sections, and so on, without appearing to be unjust.
One cannot,
and in fact, without being unjust.
Without being unjust.
Yes.
One cannot fault Desmond Hoyte
Yes, yeah.
for attempting to reach out to all sections. In fact, you've been called Desmond Passat. But I still have to press you on the question of African Guyanese, because African Guyanese are in the public sector. And the IMF and World Bank conditionalities affect those people in the public sector.
People on fixed wages.
On fixed wages more than the others. And so what I want to hear from you is, quite apart from your grand national plan, your particular plan to arrest the deteriorating situation among African Guyanese?
Well, one of the things we had put forward as a, an election issue as part of our platform was the creation of the spirit of entrepreneurship among people. The thing with, I mean, let's face it, whether for whatever reasons, cultural or what, you find that our Indian citizens tend to be more entrepreneurial than the citizens of African descent. And I think that we have to create the mechanisms for helping young people, which would include a large number of young black people, to acquire an impulse to be entrepreneurial. I mean, when they leave school, not to say, well, who can employ me? Give me a job, sir, but they want to go out to create businesses for themselves.
How are you going about doing that?
Oh, fine. First of all, you have to start in the schools, and you set up special mechanisms for giving them the formal training. You have to create financial institutions which would provide them with the financial resources they may need. You have to have an outreach program which will help them with the management. You don't tell them start a business and you run away, you leave them. You have to hold their hands for some time through some kind of outreach program. You have to help them with things like marketing, right? And generally consciously create a class of young entrepreneurs, who will then have an opportunity to grow, make wealth, because the making of wealth is not a bad thing or a dirty thing. In the dictionary of the People's National Congress, you want to get people to aspire to build an economic base which will make them comfortable in their families and comfortable and so on. So it is a whole program that we have to do to revolutionize people's thinking. That is one of the things we said we would do, and one of the things we still hope to do. On the other hand, you have organizations like ACDA, which is the African Cultural Development Association. And I talked to some of the people there, and I urged them to do the same kind of thing, So it's something not only for the government, but for the association of black people and other people who are interested in the development of our country. Because it's not good enough to build a road and to build a school and a hospital and so on if you're not building people, if you're not building people the skills and the drive to really take charge of the country and the economy.
Mr. Hoyte, you led a massive movement after the elections. People were on the streets, they were demonstrating, they were venting their anger, not only against the PPP, but against politics in Guyana in general. And then at a certain point, you pull the marchers off the street, and there was some dissatisfaction. Look back at that and tell me whether today you think that you made the right decision.
Yeah, I think so. After a time, to many people, marching became an end in itself. Every day we'll say, we're marching tomorrow, but marching for what? What was the objective? And as the marches got bigger and bigger, you found that some unruly elements inserted themselves into the demonstrators and did some mischief in terms of some looting here and there, some destruction of property. Now, it was no part of our agenda to destroy the country. We don't want to destroy Guyana. We were making a point. We wanted to tell the PPP that we were completely dissatisfied and that we wanted something in place to redress these grievances that we had. Now, you'll recall that somewhere along the line, the CARICOM people came in and proposed a formula, which on paper was a good formula, except that the PPP showed no good faith that was the Herdmanston Accord, in implementing the provisions of the Herdmanston Accord. Because one of the things, I mean, looking down the road, I mean, there were short-term objectives, but there were longer-term objectives, like the Constitution. We need constitutional reform. We need a kind of constitution which will prevent any one group from dominating the other group or putting one group in a position to victimize and discriminate. You need to strengthen those elements of the Constitution.
And on that note, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue this conversation with Mr. Hoyte on constitutional reform and Mr. Hoyte's plan for dealing with the whole question of racial division in the country, both from an economic and political standpoint. So don't go anywhere. CaribNation, we'll be right back. Welcome back to CaribNation. Today we're